Hey everybody, good morning. Welcome to the Morning Devo with Bo-O. And I'm all sweaty. Went and jogging this morning. Hey, it's May 17th, 2023. And we're going to be in Nehemiah chapter 5 today. So it's been kind of windy and yucky. But this morning, it actually was pleasant with not a ton of wind. So it was actually a good time to get out and do some running and get some jogging on. So if I'm a little sweaty, excuse me, that's the reason why. But it felt good to get out there and expand the lungs a little bit. And I don't really jog really fast nowadays. It's kind of like a slow or a fast walk maybe. But I'm sure someone in their teenage years would just be, walking faster than I run. But anyway, it's good to get out there and kind of do it, keep doing it, right? Keep doing it. Anyway, welcome to the devotion. Let's get into Nehemiah chapter 5 today as we just go through the Bible, pull out some good stuff, and really let the Word of God kind of read us. My heart is a little bit heavy. I had a wonderful friend that I grew up with pass away the other day. And so, man, just really was saddened to hear that news. Such a good guy. And his name is Guy, and boy, so many memories. And I'm just kind of piecing it all together in my mind. You know how it is sometimes when you get the news of something that happens to someone that really was a part of your world at one point, pretty much almost daily. There's always that kind of reflection. And I certainly have a lot of that today. So anyway, bear with me as I maybe am a little bit spacey. He's on my mind a little bit. So, and I'm sure you understand that. That's for sure. So let's get into it. Tina, I just want to say hi to you. And glad that you're in the House of Devo with me this morning. So this says, about this time, some of the men and their wives raised a cry of protest against their fellow Jews. This is kind of a sad statement, I must say, in the book. And I'll point that out because, usually the attacks that have happened against the Jewish people at this time were from those without, meaning those that were not part of the commonwealth of Israel. And those are the people that are in the book as being kind of not for what Nehemiah is doing in rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. But here you see this line, some of the men and their wives raised a protest against their fellow Jews. So just as in the New Testament, in the book of Acts, you have the church, the early church, going at one another. I think it's Acts chapter 6, where there's a distribution of food going on in that time. This is after Jesus rose from the dead and ascended into heaven. The early church had this issue, and there was squabbles within the early church. And just like here, you see a parallel, if you will, in the Old Testament, but this is with the Jews that have returned from a captivity into return to Jerusalem to rebuild it. And they're saying, we have such large families, we need more food to survive. Others said, we have mortgaged our fields, vineyards, and homes to get food during the famine. And others said, we have had to borrow money on our fields and vineyards to pay our taxes. We belong to the same family as those who are wealthy, and our children are just like theirs, yet we must sell our children into slavery just to get enough money to live. We have already sold some of our daughters, and we are helpless to do anything about it, for our fields and vineyards are already mortgaged together. So you can see that there's a lot of hardship going on. If you remember, there was such a vulnerable situation going on with them trying to rebuild the wall that they had to really leave everything and guard these walls that were being built, the construction, if you will, of the walls of Jerusalem. And it certainly came at a cost. And that cost was, things going on at home, at the home front. And at this time, people are also migrating into Israel from where they were captive. So you have a population growth too. People coming in. And it's very much like our day. Have you ever heard of people coming into the country by a lot of people, and how that affects things, how it affects people. So where people actually are taken, say a refugee comes from another country into our country seeking refuge, right? A safe place. Well, they got to go somewhere, and they go to a neighborhood, and does that neighborhood have the resources? It's kind of interesting how the Bible is so relevant. I mean, I think yesterday I was reading an article about a place in Chicago that was really a neighborhood that was really struggling with having immigrants come in and the government putting them into their neighborhood. And it's not that they are, people don't like the immigrants. It's not the immigrants' fault. It's just that there's not enough resources in the neighborhood, so the people in the neighborhood feel and maybe know for a fact they've lived there for a long time, and they don't feel like the government really has helped them, and so they feel it's not right to give a handout to those that aren't from the country. So there's these different arguments that go back and forth, and issues, and how it affects people's economics at the home front. Well, here you see that happening at the time of Nehemiah. And just think of how overwhelming this must have been for Nehemiah. Have you ever just felt so overwhelmed? I mean, you get not only the attack from outside, but you also have an attack from inside as well, meaning people of your own kin coming at you. So it's not just, those people out there, but it's people that are close to you as well. And Nehemiah felt this. He as a person who was in charge, who had some authority, he really felt the heat from all areas. And when it talks about slavery, it's not talking what we know as slavery, by the way. It's talking about, my kid had to be employed by that person now. And now my son is basically a slave to them. They're employed by them. That's the idea. It wasn't. When we think of slavery, sometimes we think of Egyptian slavery, the idea of, slave to the grind or chain gang slavery. But that's probably not what's being talked about here. So it says, when I heard their complaints, I was very angry. Ooh, it's always a bummer to hear complaints. How do you react to complaints? How do I react to complaints? Here Nehemiah gets angry. And after thinking it over, I like that. He thinks it over. What do I do when I hear the complaints? Do I just react? Just boom? Or do I think it over and take some time? I kind of like that idea. Think it over. And he says, I spoke out against these nobles and officials. I told them, you are hurting your own relatives by charging interest when they borrow money. Then I called a public meeting to deal with the problem. Now, Nehemiah is a person who knew probably the Word of God pretty well, I would imagine. And he remembers probably something in the law of God, meaning in the writings of Moses. And remember, that's the whole thing here, is let's go back to Moses. Let's go back to Moses, right? Nehemiah remembers that, hey, you're not supposed to charge interest to your own family, right? You're not supposed to give a loan out to your family and then charge interest. That's not right. And so a lot of the law of Moses has to deal with justice issues, economic justice, and rights that people have. And here you have this same thing going on. And Nehemiah remembers that, and he wants to call, in a sense, a town meeting. And today, we have a lot of economic injustice that goes on, a lot of issues, and that's unfortunate. And there's plenty of things we could talk about with that. But, isn't it nice when someone in authority says, hey, let's get a meeting? And, here you have this power structure that is charging interest to their own families, right? Exploiting them. Why is it exploitation? Because they were over helping build a wall. And instead of being merciful and understanding the situation, they exploit the situation. Doesn't that sound a little bit like our world? Where in weakness, people are exploited financially, right? In weakness, right? When you're down and out, no one should get sick with an illness and their house be taken away. Unreal. That's what goes on today. Same thing that was going on in Nehemiah's day. No one's place where they live should be stripped of them because they owe $1 billion to a hospital. Not right. Because of some disease, some life-threatening illness. I just don't see where that's just at all. That sounds very financially exploitive, right? It's like, man, those people are trying to get help. They're trying to get their things together to take care of their family, and now they lose their house, or now this happens, and now some business comes in and takes that, or some other business comes in and goes after that, and boy, man, that doesn't seem right. A lot of exploiting goes on, right? When you go to a hospital and you look at your bill, and for one scan, it cost $6,000, $8,000, $10,000 for a 10-minute scan, a 20-minute scan. That is financial exploitation, right? You are just trying to find out what's wrong, right? 15 minutes cost you your car? That's how much your car's worth. It doesn't make sense. It's big biz, man. And Nehemiah sees that. Isn't that cool? The Bible is super relevant to our day. Do you see how I just fell in love with this book? Yeah. Super awesome. When I heard their complaints, I was very angry. And then he meets with them. At the meeting, I said to them, we are doing all we can to redeem our Jewish relatives who have had to sell themselves to pagan foreigners. But you are selling them back into slavery again. How often must we redeem them? And they had nothing to say in their defense. So Nehemiah calls him on the carpet. He's that person who gets on the phone, calls the governor, calls the thing, calls the hospital and says, yo, this is wrong. This is wrong. And I've had to do that, is call people up and say, this is wrong. This is not ethically right. Where is the ethic? Where's the moral attitude in this? Man, nothing. There is no morality in it. There is no ethics in it. It is unjust. And it's insane that this is allowed to continue in our day. But it says, then I pressed further, what you are doing is not right. So Nehemiah continues to go on. Again, this is the book of Nehemiah, chapter 5. It reads like today. And he says, what you are doing is not right. You should not walk, and should you not walk in the fear of our God in order to avoid being mocked by enemy nations? The idea is this. You're living in a way that when people look at what you're doing to your own people and exploiting them, they mock. They look at you and they go, oh man, these people are a joke. Their God is a joke. Look at them. They say they really love God. Look at what they do to each other. And if you can what happens is when a country gets divided, other countries start mocking that country. Look at that country. What a lame country. Look at how they treat each other. Look what they do to one another, right? Look at what they allow to happen within their country. And there's no doubt that this probably happens in our world all the time, right? With us and us when we look at other countries. This kind of mocking goes on. But notice the concern of Nehemiah. It's for God, right? God, is that my concern? For God, for God's name, for God's fame? Man, that's a big question. When people examine me in the way I act, so let's take it off of the power structures and let's put it on ourselves. When people see the way I act, how do I reflect God? Do people look at me and go, man, what a joke. Look at how Bo treats his family. Gosh, his God's certainly lame. I don't want that God. Look at how he treats his wife. Look at how he treats his family. That kind of thing. Look at how he treats other people, his friends. These kind of things. Boy, then it starts really driving us home. That's right. Who am I representing? What do I represent? And it's sad. The other day I was watching a video of a college campus, and they were upset that this young person who happened to be a conservative went into the campus to do some kind of question answer thing on the campus grounds. And all these college kids surrounded this person and just were acting super lame, just really embarrassing what they were saying, and they just weren't thinking well. Their logic skills were horrible, and it really represented the college, if that makes sense. See, those college kids represent the college. So when they act like they did on that video, it really makes you think boy, these professors, man, they ain't doing a good job at all. Boy, what a wreck of a bunch of people at this college. They just can't think right. They get mad. They yell. The way they win an argument is through shouting, chanting, rhetoric, these kind of things. No dialogue, no kindness, no gentleness, just a barrage of slogans that they received from some propaganda source. Whether it was left, right, middle, I don't know. It was everything. But it was just really sad. But you can see how we all represent something, and we all kind of reflect on the way we act. It shows really who we've really trusted. We become like what we worship, no doubt about it. And if money's what we worship, we're going to become greedy people. And if we worship power, then we're going to become very controlling, powerful people. Not humble at all. But if we worship Jesus, we understand that he is patient and he is kind and he rejoices in truth. And we understand that he has compassion and perseverance. And so we try to mimic Christ. And that's what we're trying to do in our life. We don't do it perfectly, but this is what we're striving for. He is our master. And boy, that's cool. Here, the Jewish people in Nehemiah's day were in love with the Benjamins, I think, in love with, the money. And he calls them on it. And he says, what you are doing is not right. You should fear the Lord, right? You must restore their fields, vineyards, olive groves. You should give back everything that you've taken. Restore. Restore what you took. Give back. There's a place for restitution when you've done wrong. You know, when a business does wrong and gives you something or a government forces something on you and that causes harm, guess what? You know, you should, my thought is however the government lives, you should be able to live like that. Meaning if they make $200,000 a year, now you get their money, $200,000 a year. Boom, there you go. That's how it works. I mean, wow, what a trip if that's how it really went down. You took their stuff, hey, now you got to give it back. You know, you make restitution for that. Right? You don't take other people's money and give it back. You take your money and give it back. You take what they gave you and get whatever the money you generated from that olive oil or whatever you made from the vineyards in the fields, you give it back. And he says, they say to Nehemiah, we will give back everything. See, they had a consciousness of God. And so they went, oh my gosh, that's right. We're falling back into the trap of idolatry. And see, without that knowledge of God, if we have a country that doesn't have that knowledge of God, then there won't be a reason to do the right thing. We will attempt to do the right thing, but we'll do it wrong. That's what will happen. But if we have a consciousness of God and have a real fear of God, then we will do the right thing. That really hits home to me. If I really have a fear of God, I will do the right thing. You know, maybe the reason why I don't do the right thing is because there's not a right fear of God. Maybe the better the fear of the Lord, the better the wisdom in making decisions. There's a proverb on that. Yeah. So very, very cool, right? These people do make the change in contrast to people who don't make the change. What's the difference? These people had a fear of the Lord. We will do as you say. Then I called the priest and made the nobles and officials swear to do all they had promised. He brings it right up to the Lord. He says, let's get the priest involved and let's bring this before the Lord. I love that. I shook out the folds of my robe and said, if you fail to keep your promise, may God shake you like this from the homes and your property. And the whole assembly responded, Amen. And they praised the Lord, and the people did as they promised. They started worshiping God. And now when we bring things before God and we start worshiping God, we start getting clarity. We start getting clarity of what needs to happen. But it can't happen unless we come to the right source. Our fear is directed in the right spot. If it's directed in the wrong spot, then we will always make a further wrong decisions. And that's what's going on in the world all the time, right? But if we come together as a human race and we worship the Lord together, and now we fear the Lord, now we're going to start responding with compassion and true mercy and true restoration and true reconciliation, because we have an example. We have God. And he's our objective truth. He's the foundation. We're not just arbitrarily doing things, right? Based on what we want to do, what our feelings are. Wow. Feelings change with the burrito. Right? You eat the wrong burrito, man, and your feelings change quick. And it says, for the entire 12 years that I was governor of Judah and the 20th year of the 32nd year of the reign of King Artaxerxes, neither I or my officials drew on our official food allowance. The former governor, in contrast, had laid heavy burdens on the people, demanding a daily ration of food and wine besides 40 pieces of silver. Even their assistants took advantage of the people, but because I feared God, I did not act that way. Nehemiah sees injustice being done, but he doesn't buy into it. You know, I always got to think that there's got to be people in the ruling governorship of a state or a country. There's got to be a few people that are like a Nehemiah that are doing the right thing, you know. I always think there's someone. I tend to be a guy who kind of hopes all things, kind of believes all things. I kind of look to that. And I got to imagine there's someone out there who's not doing what everybody else is doing. The lobbyists, the, paying the coercion, hey, let's go to war and then we'll invest in Lockheed or, Raytheon and that kind of thing. I'll call my family. Hey, family, can you start investing? That kind of thing. Too much insider trading and what they call insider trading and all this stuff. When I was young, all I knew is that, man, all I trusted was, again, Jane's Addiction's song, The Biggest Gang I Know Is Called the Government, right? A song called 1%. And I just, that would latch on to me. And my dad taught me that. Oh, don't trust the government. Don't trust the government, because I was progressive. I grew up a very progressive, secular guy. And back then, secular progressives didn't trust the government. It's different today. The progressive movement of today actually seems to be okay with it, But, and it shows that it's not about progressive or not. It's about the human heart, right? It's the heart that's the problem. Whether you're left, right, middle, progressive, blah, it's all about our hearts. Nehemiah feared the Lord, and he said, I am not going to exploit the people. I also devoted myself to working on the wall and refused to acquire any land, and I required all my servants to spend time working on the wall. I asked for nothing, even though I regularly fed 150 Jewish officials at my table, besides all the visitors from the lands. So Nehemiah got a wonderful gift from the king of the Medo-Persian Empire to be able to go on this trip, to be able to deal with the things he needed to deal with. And so he was taken care of, but he doesn't exploit anybody else. And he makes that really clear here. And he talks about how he helped, what he did. And it says, because the people already carried a heavy burden at the end. They already were burdened, overburdened. And man, wouldn't that be nice if, the person who's running for president, when they really say, hey, the people are heavy burdened, well, let me see you grab a shovel. Let me see you grab a pick. Let me see you go into that mill. Let me see you do that. It's not such a heavy burden on you if you get in your helicopter and you go back to a nice place. But it is a heavy burden on you if you make that kind of wage and you do that kind of work and you really experience it. You're really in it. Nehemiah realized he was helping with the work. He was a part of it, and he was contracting the work. He was a contractor in that way. He was like getting the architects. He was doing a lot of the labor and the work, and he had other laborers with him for sure. But Nehemiah saw how people were beat and tired and using all their resources to do this and to get Jerusalem back up and running. And boy, he had a right heart, that you don't kick someone when they're down. You don't kick them when they're down. When someone is sick, you don't take their house. It's just unreal, right? And it says, remember, O God, all that I have done for these people, and bless me for it. Wow, Nehemiah says, God bless me for the work that I'm doing. Isn't that cool? Nothing's wrong with asking for a blessing from the Lord. So, boy, I love that. How cool is that section? Man, what a cool, relevant section to our day, for sure. Woo! This one, it felt like I was pulling right out of some news, out of current events. I mean, literally, but it was right there. It's right in Nehemiah 5. God help us not to exploit people. Help us to be like Nehemiah. Give us that kind of discernment, that kind of fear of the Lord. Man, a beautiful passage. Maybe I'll teach on this to the church one day. Hey, we'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.